Woman Norton and Ranking Member Davis for organizing this hearing. As a father of three, I know how stressful it can be to worry about our children's safety, and I applaud the efforts of this committee to evaluate these safety measures today. Question for Ms. Poland. As you mentioned in your written testimony, an emergency braking system can serve to prevent and mitigate collisions. Earlier this year, I joined my colleague Hank Johnson from Georgia to introduce the Safe Roads Act to require commercial motor vehicles to be equipped with an automatic emergency brake or AEB system. In 2015, in an agreement with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, the NTSB recommended that all AEB come standard with all passenger vehicles to help mitigate and avoid collisions. Briefly, would you extend this same recommendation to school buses and or commercial motor vehicles as my legislation does?
The NTSB actually has recommended automatic emergency braking for commercial vehicles and school buses. Most recently, we recommended this technology for school buses in our Baltimore and Chattanooga Special Investigation Report. As you're emphasizing in the work that you're talking about, automatic emergency braking provides a protection in the last moments if there is a crash that is imminent, and provides that braking to mitigate the forces involved with the crash, and in some cases to avoid it. So again, the NTSB has been a long advocate for this type of technology.
Thank you. Just switching gears slightly, crash avoidance and mitigation technologies are critical to school bus safety. I'd like to transition, however, to a safety issue that is too often overlooked: the safety of the air our children breathe on school buses. I'm working with Senator Kamala Harris and colleague Jahana Hayes, a former educator from Connecticut, to introduce the Clean Bus Act to accelerate the electrification of the nation's bus fleet. Over 25 million school-age children rely on the nation's school bus fleet to get to and from school daily. The tailpipe emissions that they are exposed to in transit and while idling in these buses are extremely toxic, especially if some of these the school bus yards, are located in urban areas next to the residential areas. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the 2019 American Lung Association State of the Air Report, which further highlights the toxicity of air in heavy-duty diesel engines, including school buses.
So ordered.
Thank you. This pollution negatively affects school attendance, health, and test scores, a burden that also tends to fall disproportionately on low-income students and students of color, like those in the district I represent on Chicago's southwest and northwest sides. The Clean School Bus Act would provide grants to help states replace diesel buses with electric buses to reduce student exposure to tailpipe emissions and curb our contribution to the climate crisis. Question for Mr. McLean. As a former county commissioner and state legislator, I understand the struggles that states deal with to find funding for safety measures like these. Do you believe that states and local governments would be supportive of additional federal grants to modernize and electrify the school bus fleet?
I do. I think that's a perfect example of one of the incentives that the federal government could use to provide increased safety measures for kids on school buses.
Great, and back to Ms. Poland, in your investigation of the Oakland bus fire, you noted that the school bus engine designs often fail to mitigate the spread of gases into the passenger compartment. That can exacerbate a situation involving a fire, but can you speak to whether or not these fumes can regularly enter into the passenger compartment, even in the absence of a fire?
Our investigation, of course, focused on the post-crash fire in that event, and when there was that significant fire in the engine compartment, how the incomplete firewall led to the fire being able to spread into the passenger compartment.
Can you comment on the entrance of fumes into the bus cavity?
The NTSB currently does not have a position on that aspect.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.